have you ever felt that strange sensation when the woods seem to be watching you? That feeling when the rustling leaves aren't just moved by the wind, but something else entirely? Let me share a story that happened in a small town just like yours. A tale that might explain those unexplainable noises you hear at night. Or why sometimes, when you're all alone, you feel like someone, or something, is breathing right behind you. Before I begin this chilling tale, make sure you're comfortable, but not too comfortable. And if you enjoy stories that make your skin crawl in the most delicious way, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Leave a comment telling me what you think happened after this story ends, because some mysteries are never truly solved. Now, let's begin. The town of Pine Creek, Massachusetts wasn't known for much. A sleepy little place nestled between rolling hills and dense forest, population barely scraping 3,000. The kind of town where everyone knows everyone, or at least they think they do. I moved there in late September, when the leaves were just beginning to turn that beautiful mix of crimson and gold. The rental cabin I'd found online seemed perfect, isolated enough for the peace I desperately needed, but only a 15-minute drive to town for supplies. "You must be Ellie," said Mrs. Harmon, the elderly woman who ran the local grocery store. She smiled warmly as she rang up my items. "We don't get many newcomers around here, especially ones who choose to stay out by Whisper Woods." I nodded, returning her smile. "That's me. Just needed some time away from the city, a place to write and clear my head." Something flickered across her face, concern, maybe, but it vanished quickly. "Well, dear, just remember to lock your doors at night." She handed me my bags. "And try not to wander too deep into those woods after dark. The trails can be confusing." I thanked her for the advice, assuming it was a standard small-town concern. It would be 3 days before I understood what she really meant. That first evening, I sat on the porch with a glass of wine, watching the sunset paint the forest in shades of amber. The silence was so complete it felt like a physical presence. No car horns, no neighbors' music, just the occasional bird call and the whisper of leaves. I slept better that night than I had in months. The trouble began on my 3rd day. I'd established a routine, coffee on the porch at sunrise, writing until early afternoon, then exploring the trails near the cabin. There was a marked path that looped around for about 2 miles, perfect for clearing my head when the words wouldn't come. That day, I noticed something odd about halfway through my walk. A small cairn of stones that I was certain hadn't been there the day before. 5 smooth rocks balanced precariously on top of each other, the largest at the bottom, the smallest, no bigger than a quarter, perched delicately at the top. Someone must have been on the trail earlier. Still, something about it made me uneasy. When I returned to that spot the next day, the cairn was gone. In its place was a crude circle made of pine cones. The woods suddenly felt less welcoming, as if they were holding their breath, waiting for something. That night, I woke at exactly 3:17 a.m. The cabin was silent, but different somehow. The quality of the darkness had changed. It felt expectant. I lay perfectly still, straining to hear anything unusual. After a minute or two, it came. A soft, rhythmic tapping on the bedroom window. Tap, 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 like a fingernail against glass. My heart slammed against my ribs. The window was at least 15 feet off the ground. The tapping continued for exactly 12 beats, then stopped. I counted the seconds of silence that followed. 1, 2, 3. When I reached 60, I found the courage to slip out of bed and cross to the window. Pulling back the curtain, I saw nothing but my own pale reflection in the dark mass of trees beyond. But there, in the corner of the glass, was a single, perfect handprint. Too small to be an adult's, too well defined to be old. I didn't sleep again that night. The next morning, I convinced myself I'd dreamed the whole thing. The handprint was gone, and in the cheerful light of day my fears seemed foolish. I decided a hike would clear my head. The day was perfect, cool but sunny, the forest alive with the rustle of animals. About a mile in, the marked trail forked. The sign indicating the waterfall pointed left, but something drew my attention to the right-hand path. It was narrower, less traveled, disappearing into a dense section of pines. Standing at that fork, I felt a sudden, inexplicable certainty that someone was watching me. The hairs on my arms rose. "Hello?" I called out, immediately regretting breaking the silence. No one answered. But as I turned to take the left fork toward the waterfall, a sound stopped me. Faint, distant, the laugh of a child. It came from the right-hand path. I stood frozen, listening intently. Nothing. Then I heard it again, definitely a child's laugh, followed by what sounded like someone calling my name. "Ellie?" So faint it could have been the wind. But it wasn't the wind. Common sense told me to turn around, go back to the cabin. But something stronger pulled me toward that narrow path. What if a child was lost in these woods? I took the right fork. The trail quickly became more difficult to follow, overgrown in places. The forest seemed to swallow all sound except for my own breathing. I called out occasionally, but heard no response. No more laughter. No more whispers of my name. I'd been walking for maybe 20 minutes when I found the first item, a small worn teddy bear propped against the base of a massive oak tree. It looked old, its fur matted and dirty, one button eye missing. Next to it was a faded red hair ribbon. My stomach clenched. These weren't items someone had accidentally dropped. They'd been deliberately placed. I should have turned back then. Instead, I took a picture with my phone and continued forward, an inexplicable sense of urgency driving me deeper into the woods. The trail began to slope downward, leading into a ravine where the trees grew so densely that it was almost like twilight despite being midday. The air felt different here, heavy, stagnant, carrying a faint, sweet scent I couldn't identify. That's when I saw it. A clearing up ahead. And in that clearing, a small wooden structure. Not quite a cabin, more like a large shed or playhouse. It was crude, weathered by years of exposure. Its single window like an eye watching my approach. The door hung slightly ajar. Everything in me screamed to turn around. Yet I kept walking, drawn forward by something I couldn't explain. Curiosity, yes, but also a strange sense of recognition, as if I'd seen this place before. 10 feet from the structure, I stopped. There was absolute silence. Not a bird call, not a rustle of leaves. Nothing. "Hello?" I called again, my voice barely above a whisper. "Is anyone there?" The door of the structure creaked open another inch, just enough to suggest invitation. I took one step forward, then another. My hand reached for the rough wooden door, my fingertips just brushing its surface when I wouldn't do that if I were you. The voice behind me nearly stopped my heart. I spun around to see a man standing at the edge of the clearing. Tall, maybe mid-50s, with the weathered look of someone who spends most of their time outdoors. He wasn't smiling. "This is private property," he said, though his tone suggested a much more serious offense than simple trespassing. "And you're a long way from the public trails, miss." Relief flooded through me, quickly followed by embarrassment and lingering unease. "I'm sorry," I said, stepping away from the structure. I thought I heard someone. The man's expression was unreadable. No one comes out this way, not anymore. He gestured for me to follow him. "Come on, I'll walk you back to the main trail." I hesitated, glancing back at the structure. What is that place? The man was already walking away. Nothing important. Old Forest Service storage, been abandoned for years. As we walked, I introduced myself. He told me his name was Robert Grayson, that he owned the property adjacent to the state forest. His manner was polite but distant, his eyes constantly scanning the trees around us. "You're staying in the Carson cabin," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes. How did you—" "Small town, word travels." He stopped at a fork in the trail. "Take this path. It'll lead you back to the main trail in about a quarter mile." I thanked him, but before I could turn to leave, he placed a hand on my arm. Light, but insistent. "Miss Bennett," he said, finally looking directly at me. His eyes were a startling blue against his tanned skin. "These woods, they can play tricks on the mind. If you think you hear something, voices, music, whatever, don't follow them. Stick to the marked trails. Better yet, stay out of the woods altogether." That night, I researched Pine Creek online, looking for any stories about the woods. There wasn't much, just the usual small-town history and a few vague references to unexplained disappearances in the 1980s. I found a blog post from someone who'd visited Pine Creek 5 years earlier. They mentioned hearing rumors about children going missing near Whisper Woods over the decades. The post ended with a chilling line. "The locals say the forest calls to certain people. If you hear it calling your name, run the other way." Sleep didn't come easily. Every creak of the cabin had me sitting up in bed, straining to listen. Around midnight, a storm rolled in, rain lashing against the roof and windows. The next day, my restlessness won out. I decided to drive into town, maybe find a cafe with Wi-Fi, possibly talk to some locals about the woods. The main street of Pine Creek was exactly what you'd expect. A handful of shops, a diner, a small library, and a town hall. I chose the diner, reasoning that it would be the best place to overhear local gossip. The waitress, a woman around my age with a name tag reading Maggie, smiled warmly as she refilled my coffee. "You're staying out at the Carson place, right?" she asked. "Mrs. Harmon mentioned we had a writer in town." I nodded, wondering just how quickly information traveled here. "It's perfect for what I need. Quiet, isolated." I hesitated, then added, "Though the woods are a bit unsettling at times." Something flickered in her eyes. "The woods can be tricky," she agreed carefully. "Lots of trails that loop back on themselves. Easy to get lost if you're not familiar." "I met a ranger yesterday," I said. "Robert Grayson?" Maggie's hand, still holding the coffee pot, froze momentarily. "Rob's not actually a ranger," she said after a moment. "He owns that land out past the state forest, but he doesn't work for Park Service." Before I could ask more, the bell above the door chimed, and an elderly man with a cane entered. The entire diner seemed to quiet. "That's Dr. Larson," Maggie whispered. "Town doctor for almost 50 years. He lost his daughter in those woods back in '82. Never really recovered." My curiosity piqued. "What happened to her?" Maggie glanced nervously at the old man. "We don't really talk about it, but if you're really interested, you might want to check the library. They keep all the old newspaper archives. Ask for the files on the summer of '82. That's when it all started." The Pine Creek Library was housed in a beautiful Victorian building. The librarian, a petite woman with silver hair, introduced herself as Miss Winters. When I asked about newspaper archives from 1982, her smile tightened. "Local history project?" she asked, her tone carefully neutral. "Something like that," I replied. "I'm particularly interested in any incidents that happened near Whisper Woods." The headlines told a chilling story. June 15th. Local girl missing. Search continues. June 18th. No signs of Emily Larson after 3-day search. June 30th. Search called off for missing 12-year-old. Then, in July, another headline. Second child disappears near Whisper Woods. August brought a third disappearance. This time, a boy of 8. By September, the town was in a panic. The most disturbing article came from late September. A fourth child had gone missing, but this one returned. 10-year-old Michael Wells was found wandering along the main road 3 days after his disappearance, dehydrated and confused. The boy claimed he'd followed singing into the woods and found a special place where the trees talk. When asked where he'd been for 3 days, he reportedly said it wasn't 3 days there. It was just a little while. There were no more disappearances that year. But as I skimmed through papers from following years, I found a disturbing pattern. Every few years, another child would vanish near those woods. Sometimes they were found, confused but unharmed. Most were never seen again. The most recent case was from 2017. A 9-year-old girl who claimed she'd seen a little house deep in the woods before her parents realized she was missing. I was so absorbed in my research that I didn't notice someone had entered the room until a throat cleared behind me. I turned to find Robert Grayson standing there, arms crossed over his chest, expression grim. "Finding what you're looking for?" he asked. I tried to hide my surprise. "Just researching local history." "Local tragedies, you mean?" His voice was flat. "Why are you so interested in those old stories, Miss Bennett?" "Curiosity. I'm a writer. Stories are my business." "Some stories aren't meant to be told." He sat down across from me, especially by outsiders who don't understand what this town has been through. "And you do understand?" I challenged. "You seem awfully protective of those woods." A muscle twitched in his jaw. "I've lived here my whole life. My family has been in Pine Creek for generations. And yes, I was here in '82. He leaned forward. "I was 12 years old when Emily Larson disappeared. She was my best friend." That revelation shifted something in the air between us. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "I didn't know. It was a long time ago, but those woods, they took something from this town. Something we never got back." "What do you think happened to those children?" I asked. He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I don't think, I know. Because I was with Emily that day. I was the last person to see her alive." My heart pounded as he continued. "We were playing near the creek. Emily said she heard music coming from deeper in the woods. I heard it too, like a music box, but wrong somehow. We followed it. We shouldn't have, but we were kids, curious." He rubbed his hands together nervously. "We found a clearing. There was a structure there, like the one you were approaching yesterday. Emily wanted to go inside. I was scared. Something felt wrong. We argued. I told her I was going home, that she should come with me. She refused." His voice broke slightly. "I left her there. By the time I got home and told my parents, it was too late. We never found her." A chill ran through me. "The structure I found yesterday is not the same one," he said firmly. "That one burned down in '83. Some of the parents thought someone was taking the children. They destroyed it. But the disappearances continued," I said, remembering the articles from later years. He nodded grimly. "Because it was never about the structure, it was about the woods themselves. The children who came back, they were never the same. Michael Wells killed himself when he was 16. Left a note saying they're still calling me. The Anderson girl from '95, institutionalized by 18. He ran a hand through his hair. "I've spent my life studying those woods, trying to understand what happened. My property, the land I bought, it borders the area where most of the disappearances happened. I've been trying to keep people away, keep them safe." "Safe from what?" I asked, though part of me didn't want to know the answer. "That's just it. I don't know exactly. But something in those woods, it calls to certain people, especially children, but not always." His gaze intensified. "Has it called to you, Ellie? Have you heard your name when no one was there? Have you heard music or laughter?" I couldn't answer. Couldn't admit that yes, I had heard those things. "I thought so," he said softly. "You need to leave Pine Creek. today before it gets stronger." "This is crazy," I said, standing up. "You're talking about woods like they're sentient or something." "Not the woods themselves," he corrected. "Something in them. Something that's been there longer than the town, longer than any of us." I left the library with his words echoing in my head, torn between dismissing him as a trauma-haunted man with wild theories and acknowledging the cold fear his story had awakened in me. As I pulled into the driveway of my cabin, my headlights swept across the porch, and my blood froze. Sitting on the porch steps was a small cairn of stones, identical to the one I'd seen on the trail. 5 stones, perfectly balanced, the smallest perched delicately on top. I sat in the car for several long minutes, staring at that simple stack of rocks. It could be nothing. Kids playing a prank, perhaps even Robert Grayson trying to scare me into leaving. Or it could be something else entirely. When I finally worked up the courage to exit the car, I approached the porch carefully. Up close, I could see the stones were smooth river rocks. The top one, no bigger than a quarter, had a small spiral pattern etched into its surface. The symbol looked old, weathered, as if it had been carved long ago. I nudged the cairn with my foot, sending the stones tumbling across the porch. Then I hurried inside, double-checking that all windows and doors were securely locked. That night, the sounds from the woods seemed louder, more insistent. The rustle of leaves became whispers just below the threshold of understanding. And underneath it all, so faint I might have imagined it, the distant tinkling of music, like a music box with several notes out of key. I didn't sleep, couldn't sleep. Instead, I sat in the living room with all the lights on, my laptop open to a flight booking site, cursor hovering over the purchase button for a ticket back to Boston the next day. Leave Pine Creek. That's what Robert had said. Before it gets stronger. But stronger, how? And what exactly was it? I woke to knocking. Insistent, urgent. For a disoriented moment, I thought it was that rhythmic tapping on the window. But this was louder, human, someone at the front door. I stumbled to answer it, the digital clock on the microwave reading 2:17 p.m. I'd slept most of the day away. Robert Grayson stood on my porch, face pale, eyes wide with what looked like genuine fear. "You need to come with me," he said without preamble. "Now." "What? Why?" I asked, still foggy with sleep. "Because they found another one," he said, "another structure. Deep in the woods where no one goes. Except, I think you've been there, and I think it wants you to come back." "Found another one what?" I asked. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew. Another structure. Like the one I'd seen. Like the one where Emily had disappeared all those years ago. "The Rangers found it after the storm," Robert explained. "It shouldn't be there. No one built it. It just appeared." "That's impossible," I said, without much conviction. "Structures don't just appear in the woods," he agreed. "Unless something wants them to be found." They found something else, too, a backpack, with your driver's license inside. That got my attention. "That's ridiculous. I've never lost my backpack." I turned to point to where it should have been by the door. It wasn't there. "This isn't possible," I whispered. "Come with me," Robert said. "I need to show you something." 20 minutes later, we were in his truck, bumping down a narrow dirt road I hadn't noticed before. It led to what Robert called his research station, a small cabin surrounded by a high chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. Inside, every wall was covered with maps, photographs, news clippings, and handwritten notes. A large table held what appeared to be survey equipment and various electronic devices. Robert pulled out a thick folder. "These are all the documented disappearances connected to these woods, 47 since records began in 1879. He laid the folder on the table, then pulled down a large map. "And these are the locations where each person was last seen." The map was marked with dozens of red pins. At first glance, they seemed randomly scattered throughout the woods. But as I looked closer, I noticed a pattern. They formed a spiral, with the center located deep in the most remote section of forest. "What's at the center?" I asked. "Nothing. At least, nothing you can see on any normal day." He pulled out another map, this one older, yellowed with age. "This was drawn by my grandfather in 1932. See the difference?" The older map showed the same woods, but with one significant addition. A small structure drawn at the exact center of where the spiral of pins converged on the newer map. "It comes and goes," Robert said quietly. "The structure. Sometimes it's there for years. Sometimes it disappears overnight, only to reappear somewhere else in the woods, but always calling to someone." "And you think it's calling to me?" The words sounded ridiculous as I said them, yet a part of me recognized their truth. "I know it is. I saw your face when you were near it yesterday." He turned away, moving to a bookshelf. My grandfather had a theory. He thought the woods, or something in them, feeds on a particular type of energy, imagination maybe, creativity, the kind children have in abundance. "So, what do we do?" I asked, surprised at hearing myself saying "we," as if I'd already accepted his bizarre theory. "We find the structure, we destroy it, like they did in '83. It won't solve the problem permanently, it never does, but it might break whatever connection it's forming with you." "And if we don't?" His eyes met mine, solemn and certain. "Then I think you'll disappear, just like the others. Just like Emily." The hike was grueling, taking us far off any marked trail. Robert moved with the confidence of someone who knew these woods intimately, barely checking the compass he carried. The day was waning, shadows lengthening, when Robert suddenly stopped. "Listen," he whispered. At first, I heard nothing unusual. Then it came, faint, distant, but unmistakable. The delicate notes of a music box playing a melody I almost recognized. "You hear it too?" I asked, needing confirmation that it wasn't just in my head. He nodded grimly. "This way, and stay close." We followed the music. The forest had changed around us, the trees growing closer together, the light taking on a strange greenish quality that didn't seem natural for the time of day. Then, suddenly, we emerged into a clearing, and there it was, the structure. Not exactly like the one I'd seen before. This one was larger, its design more elaborate. It resembled a small cottage, complete with a pitched roof and a door painted a cheerful red. The music was coming from inside. Robert reached into his backpack, pulling out a can of gasoline and a lighter. "We burn it," he said, "now, before it can—" "Wait," I interrupted, a strange calm settling over me. "I need to see inside first." "Ellie, no, that's exactly what it wants." But I was already moving towards the cottage, drawn by something I couldn't explain. A certainty that answers awaited me inside. The door swung open at my touch, revealing a single room, sparsely furnished with a small table, a chair, and a shelf holding a music box. The source of the melody that still played, though no one had wound it. On the table lay a notebook. My notebook. The one I'd been writing in since arriving in Pine Creek, except I knew for certain that notebook was back at my cabin, on the desk where I'd left it that morning. I approached slowly, heart pounding. The notebook was open to the last page I'd written on. A description of a dream I'd had 2 nights ago. A dream about a small house in the woods where lost things were found. "Ellie, we need to go, now." Robert's voice seemed to come from very far away. I reached for the notebook. As my fingers touched the page, the music from the box changed, becoming faster, more insistent. Words appeared on the page, flowing across the paper as if an invisible hand were writing them. "Come stay, tell our stories. We've been waiting for you." "Who's been waiting?" I whispered. The air in the cottage shifted, grew colder. The shadows in the corners deepened, moved, and I suddenly knew we were not alone. "The children," came a voice that was neither male nor female, young nor old. "The lost ones, the taken ones. They need a voice, a storyteller." From the corner of my eye, I saw movement. Small figures stepping out of the shadows. Children of different ages, different eras. Their faces were peaceful, but their eyes were ancient. At the front stood a girl about 12 years old, wearing clothes that looked like they were from the early 1980s. "Emily," Robert breathed. The girl smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Hello, Robbie. You've grown up." "Emily, what happened to you?" Robert's voice broke. "Here, there, everywhere the woods touch." She turned to me. "We need her. She hears us. She can tell our stories." "No," Robert said firmly, stepping between us. "You can't have her." Emily's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room dropped sharply. "We are not taken. We are chosen. To preserve. To remember." Her gaze fixed on me. "You understand, don't you, Ellie? The importance of stories?" And God help me, I did understand. The writer in me resonated with her words. "What happens if I stay?" I asked. "You become the keeper," Emily said simply. "You write our stories. You give us voice. And in return, you see wonders no human has ever seen. And if I refuse?" The music box stopped abruptly. "Then you leave," Emily said, her voice suddenly childlike again, "and forget, like all the others who weren't right for us." Robert grabbed my arm. "Ellie, please, whatever it's offering, it's not worth it. These aren't children anymore." I looked at the phantom children gathered before me, at Emily, whose form seemed to flicker between solid and transparent, at my notebook, where words continued to appear without a hand to write them. These woods wanted stories, experiences, the unique energy of human imagination. They fed on it somehow, luring those who were particularly sensitive. Particularly like me. "I'm sorry," I said to Emily. "I can't stay." Emily's face hardened. "You already belong to us, Ellie Bennett. You felt it the moment you entered these woods. You can leave now, but part of you will always remain. And eventually, you'll return." "No," I said, backing toward the door. "I won't." The cottage began to tremble. The floorboards shook beneath our feet. The music box resumed its eerie melody, faster now, discordant. "Run!" Robert shouted, yanking me backward through the doorway. We fled the clearing as the cottage's windows shattered outward. The forest around us came alive, branches reaching down as if to grab us, roots rising from the ground to trip our feet. Finally, we broke through the tree line into an open area, the backyard of Robert's research station. Only then did I realize the woods had gone completely silent. "Is it over?" I gasped. Robert looked back at the dark wall of trees. "For now," he said. "But they don't give up easily, especially not once they've chosen someone." The next morning, I packed my things and checked out of the cabin. Robert drove me to the bus station one town over. As I boarded the bus back to Boston, he pressed a small package into my hands. "My grandfather's research," he explained. "If you ever start to feel it calling you again, read these. Remember what it really is." That was 3 months ago. I've been back in my Boston apartment, working on a new novel, not about enchanted woods or missing children, something safe. But sometimes, late at night, I hear it, the faint melody of a music box. Sometimes I smell pine needles and damp earth, though my windows are closed. And sometimes when I open my notebook, I find words there that I don't remember writing. We're still waiting, Ellie. Your stories, our voices, forever. I try to convince myself it was all some bizarre hallucination. But then I look at the small cairn of stones that appeared on my balcony last week. 5 smooth river rocks stacked one atop the other, the smallest perched delicately on top. and I wonder how long I can resist the call of Whisper Woods. How long before I return to Pine Creek, to that forgotten corner of Massachusetts where the trees talk and the lost ones wait. How long before I become their keeper? I guess I'll find out soon, because yesterday I booked a ticket back. Wait, did you hear that? That soft tapping at your window? That whisper of your name on the night air? The woods are everywhere, you know, even here, even now. And they might be calling for you next. If you enjoyed this tale, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Leave a comment telling me what you think happened to Ellie after she returned to Pine Creek. Did she become the keeper of lost stories? Did Robert save her once again? Or did she find a way to free the children trapped between worlds? And remember, the next time you're walking in the woods and hear someone call your name, it might not be who you think it is. Sleep tight, and I'll see you in the next story. Story number 2. Have you ever felt like you weren't alone, even when you were? That prickle on the back of your neck, the feeling of being watched when no one's there. What if I told you that some houses aren't just structures of wood and brick, but living entities with memories and desires? I've experienced it firsthand, and my story might make you look at your own home differently tonight. If you've ever heard strange noises in your house at night and told yourself it was just the building settling, what if it wasn't? What if your home was trying to communicate with you? Listen closely to my experience, and maybe you'll recognize similar patterns in your own home. And if you do, well, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below, because after what I experienced, I need to know if I'm alone in this, or if others have felt their houses breathe too. The story begins now. I never believed in haunted houses until I lived in one. Not the Hollywood kind with slamming doors and floating apparitions, but something far more subtle, and in my opinion, far more terrifying. A house that felt conscious. The Lakewood neighborhood in Seattle had always been my dream location. When I finally saved enough for a down payment, I couldn't believe my luck finding a charming 1920s craftsman within my budget. The real estate agent seemed eager, too eager, to close the deal, but I chalked it up to the competitive market. If only I'd asked more questions. "It's a special house," she said on closing day, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "It just needs the right person." I remember laughing. "Well, I hope I qualify." She handed me the keys with an odd hesitation. "Just give it time to adjust to you." I dismissed her comment as real estate agent quirkiness. Now I understand she was trying to warn me, in the only way she could. The first few weeks were uneventful, just the normal settling into a new space. The house had character, with its original hardwood floors that creaked in certain spots, leaded glass windows that filtered the light into rainbow patterns on the walls, and built-in bookshelves flanking a river rock fireplace. It felt warm, inviting, like coming home after a long absence. It was mid-October when I first noticed something unusual. I had been living there for exactly 1 month. I woke at 3:17 a.m., I remember checking my phone, to the sound of footsteps on the stairs. Not loud, thundering steps, but the careful, measured pace of someone trying not to be heard. My bedroom door was closed. I lay frozen, heart hammering against my ribs, ears straining in the darkness. The footsteps stopped outside my door. I waited for the knob to turn for someone to enter, but nothing happened. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, I gathered enough courage to check. The hallway was empty. The stairs were empty. Every door and window was locked from the inside, just as I had left them before going to bed. I told myself it was an old house settling, or maybe the pipes. I almost believed it, until it happened again the next night. And the next. Always at 3:17 a.m. Always stopping outside my bedroom door. By the 4th night, I was sleep-deprived and on edge. I decided to stay awake and catch whatever or whoever was making those sounds. I positioned myself in the hallway with a clear view of the stairs, armed with my phone's camera and a baseball bat I hadn't used since high school. At exactly 3:17 a.m., the footsteps began, but there was nothing there. Nothing visible, at least. Yet, I could hear each distinct step, as if some invisible weight was pressing down on each stair, making the old wood creak and groan. I felt the air grow colder. My breath fogged in front of me even though the heating was on. And then, I felt something brush past me. Not aggressively, more like someone carefully avoiding collision in a narrow hallway. That was when I knew my house wasn't haunted in the traditional sense. It was alive, somehow. And it was getting to know me. Most people would have fled, but curiosity, or maybe foolishness, kept me there. Plus, this was my first home, purchased with every cent of my savings. I couldn't just abandon it, financially or emotionally. So instead, I decided to learn about the house's history. County records showed the house had been built in 1923 by a carpenter named Thomas Mercer for his young family. The construction had taken 3 years, unusually long for a house of its size. According to local newspaper clippings I found at the library, Mercer had been obsessed with building a house that would stand for generations, using lumber he'd personally selected and cured. What caught my attention was that Mercer had lost his wife during the construction, influenza, according to her death certificate. Yet he continued building, now with a newborn daughter to raise alone. There were rumors that he incorporated items belonging to his wife into the house itself. Her jewelry embedded in the fireplace mortar, her favorite books sealed within the walls for insulation, even strands of her hair mixed into the wood stain. He wanted her to always be part of the home, an elderly neighbor told me when I asked about the house's history. Some folks thought he went crazy with grief, but that house became his masterpiece. They say he talked to it like it was her. I shivered at his words, remembering the footsteps, the cold spots, the feeling of being watched. Was I sharing my home with the essence of a grieving man's lost love? Or something else entirely? That night, I did something that felt ridiculous even as I was doing it. I spoke to the house. "I'm not here to hurt you," I said aloud to my empty living room. "I just want to understand what's happening." Nothing responded, of course. But that night, for the first time in weeks, there were no footsteps at 3:17 a.m. Instead, I woke to the smell of fresh bread baking. The aroma was so vivid, so real, that I stumbled downstairs half asleep, expecting to find someone in my kitchen. But the oven was cold, the counters empty. The scent lingered for a moment longer, then faded like morning mist. That's when the dreams began. Not nightmares, exactly, but vivid scenes of a life I'd never lived. I'd see a woman in a floral dress gently rocking a cradle by the fireplace. I'd feel the weight of a carpenter's tools in my hands as I carefully measured and cut wood for the banister. I'd experience the bone-deep exhaustion of working through the night, fingers bleeding from splinters, driven by some desperate need to complete the house before what? The dream always faded before I knew. During my waking hours, I started noticing other things. The temperature in rooms would adjust itself to my preference without me touching the thermostat. Lights would dim slightly when I was watching a movie, as if creating the perfect ambiance. The hot water would never run out during my shower, even though the tank was small and old. It was as if the house was accommodating me, learning my habits, anticipating my needs. I began talking to it regularly, feeling less foolish each time. "Thank you for the hot water," I'd say after a shower, or "I appreciate you keeping the creaking down last night." It seemed only polite. My friends thought I was losing it. "Oh, you need to get out more," my best friend Megan insisted over coffee one day. "All this isolation in that old house is making you weird. maybe she was right. So, I invited her to stay the weekend, thinking another presence might help me see things more objectively. The house didn't like it. From the moment Megan arrived, small things started going wrong. Her phone wouldn't charge in any outlet. The guest room where she was staying remained stubbornly cold despite the heat being on full blast. The water in her shower alternated between scalding and freezing. And all night long, the floorboards above her room creaked as if someone was pacing back and forth, back and forth. "Your place is a maintenance nightmare," she said the next morning. Dark circles under her eyes. "And those floors need to be fixed." I barely slept with all that noise. I nodded, not mentioning that her room was on the top floor. There was nothing above her but the attic, which could only be accessed through a small hatch in the hallway ceiling, a hatch that had been firmly closed all night. Megan left early, claiming a work emergency. I pretended to believe her. That night, I sat cross-legged on the living room floor, staring at the fireplace where I'd seen the woman rocking a cradle in my dreams. "You didn't have to be rude," I said to the empty room. "She's my friend." A log in the fireplace shifted, sending up a small shower of sparks, though the fire had died hours ago. I took it as acknowledgement. "Look," I continued, feeling increasingly less crazy for having this one-sided conversation. "If we're going to live together, we need some ground rules. I respect that this is your home too, but I need to have a life, have friends over occasionally. Can we manage that?" The house remained silent, but the tension in the air seemed to ease slightly. The radiator kicked on with a comforting clank, sending warmth spreading through the previously chilly room. I smiled. I'll take that as a yes. That night, I dreamed more vividly than ever before. I was Thomas Mercer, holding my dying wife's hand as she struggled to breathe through the influenza ravaging her lungs. Her swollen belly held our unborn child, and terror gripped me at the thought of losing them both. "Promise me," she wheezed, her fingers digging into my wrist with surprising strength. "Promise you'll finish our home. Make it strong, make it safe, so part of me can watch over our child even when I'm gone." "I promise," I heard myself say, Thomas's voice emerging from my throat. "I'll build it with all the love I have for you. I'll make it live." In the dream, I felt his desperate grief, his manic determination. I watched through his eyes as he collected items from his wife's sick room, her hairbrush with strands still clinging to it, pages from her journal, the silver locket containing a sketch of her face. I felt the weight of his newborn daughter in his arms as his wife's body was taken away, and I understood what he had done. Not just a memorial, not just symbolic gestures of incorporating his wife's possessions into the house. Thomas Mercer had somehow found a way to bind his wife's spirit to the very structure of the home itself. I woke with tears streaming down my face, my heart aching with a grief that wasn't mine. The room was filled with the subtle scent of lavender. His wife's perfume, I somehow knew. The house was sharing its memories with me, making me understand. Over the next few weeks, a strange routine developed. By day, I worked from home as a freelance graphic designer, taking breaks to talk to the house about my projects or asking its opinion on color schemes. I'd hold up swatches and notice how the light would shift subtly to make certain colors appear more vibrant. At night, I'd dream Thomas Mercer's memories, watching through his eyes as he raised his daughter alone, as he obsessively crafted every inch of the house with devotion bordering on madness. I learned the wife's name was Eleanor. I learned their daughter was named Sarah. I watched Sarah grow up in this house, always strangely protected. When she fell on the stairs once, the wooden banister seemed to curve slightly, catching her before she could tumble to the bottom. When a kitchen fire started while Thomas was outside, the flames mysteriously extinguished themselves before he returned. The house had been protecting them, just as it now seemed to be protecting me. One night, I came home late after meeting a client. The neighborhood wasn't dangerous, but walking alone after dark still made me uneasy. As I approached my front door, I noticed a man lingering near my gate, his face obscured by the shadows of the large maple tree in my yard. "Can I help you?" I called, my hand tightening around my keys, positioning one between my fingers as a makeshift weapon. The man stepped forward. "This your place? Been admiring it. These old craftsmen have good bones. Bet it's real nice inside." Something in his tone made my skin crawl. "My husband will be home any minute," I lied, moving toward the door. "Have a good night." He chuckled, a sound that raised the hair on my arms. "No wedding ring. And no car in the driveway except yours. Why don't you show me around while you wait for this husband of yours?" My heart pounded as I reached the front steps. Just as his footsteps quickened behind me, the porch light began to flicker wildly. The front door, which I knew I had locked that morning, swung open on its own. From inside came a thunderous creaking, as if every board and beam in the house was suddenly shifting and groaning under massive pressure. The man froze. "What the—" A gust of ice-cold air blasted from the doorway, carrying with it the faint sound of what might have been a woman's whisper. The porch swing began moving violently, though there was no wind. The man backed away, his face pale. "Lady, your house is messed up," he said, then turned and hurried down the street. I stepped inside, shaking with adrenaline, and the door gently closed behind me. The house immediately grew warm, the creaking subsided, and the lights stabilized to a soft, comforting glow. "Thank you," I whispered, leaning against the wall. The wallpaper felt warm beneath my palm, almost like skin with a pulse beneath it. That night's dream was different. I wasn't seeing Thomas's memories. Instead, I was moving through the house as if I were the house, aware of every nail and board, every pipe and wire. I could feel the weight of the roof, the solid connection to the foundation, the gentle decay of time in certain beams, and the strength remaining in others. Most distinctly, I could feel Eleanor's presence, not as a ghost haunting the halls, but as an awareness integrated into the very structure itself. She had merged with the house out of love, a mother's desperate desire to protect her child even after death. And now, decades later, with Sarah long gone and probably deceased herself, the house was still fulfilling its purpose. It had chosen me as its new ward, its new family. The realization should have terrified me. Instead, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. In my solitary life, often feeling adrift and unmoored, the house had offered me something I'd never expected to find. A sense of being truly at home, truly protected. But I was about to discover that protection came with a price. Winter arrived with unusual ferocity that year. Seattle's typically mild climate gave way to freezing temperatures and heavy snowfall that shut down the city for days. Trapped inside by the weather, I found myself growing closer to the house, more attuned to its subtle communications. I began to notice that my emotions seemed to affect the physical structure. When I was happy, the house felt lighter somehow, boards less creaky, rooms brighter even without additional lighting. When I was sad or stressed, the house seemed to contract slightly, as if pulling in around me protectively, ceiling beams lowering by imperceptible degrees. One blizzard night, as wind howled around the eaves, I sat before the fireplace with a glass of wine, talking to Eleanor as if she were sitting beside me. I wonder what happens to houses when their people leave, I mused aloud. All those years with the wrong owners who didn't understand what you were. It must have been lonely. The fire flickered, sending shadows dancing across the walls that seemed to form patterns almost like written words, too quick to read but deliberate in their movements. "I'm not planning to leave," I assured the silence. "But I'm curious. Would you let me go if I needed to?" The temperature dropped so suddenly that my breath fogged in front of me. The fire dimmed to embers. Every door in the house slammed shut simultaneously with a force that rattled the windows. Picture frames on the mantel tilted forward, one falling to shatter on the hearth, my only photo of my parents, taken before their accident 5 years ago. I stood, heart racing. Eleanor, what are you doing? The shadows on the walls darkened and stretched, no longer resembling words but elongated fingers reaching toward me. A high-pitched sound emanated from the walls themselves, like wood under impossible pressure, ready to snap. "Stop it," I shouted, genuine fear gripping me for the first time since the footsteps had begun. "You're scaring me." As suddenly as it started, everything ceased. The fire roared back to life. The temperature normalized. The shadows retreated to their ordinary shapes, but the broken picture remained, my parents' smiling faces distorted by the cracked glass. Carefully, I picked up the frame, removing the photo from the shards. "That was uncalled for," I said quietly, my hands trembling slightly. "I have the right to ask questions. I have the right to make my own choices." That night, the house was utterly silent. No comforting creaks as I drifted off to sleep. No dreams of Thomas or Eleanor, just absence. As if the consciousness that had been communicating with me had withdrawn completely. I slept fitfully, waking repeatedly to the feeling that something fundamental had changed. By morning, I was exhausted and heartsick, feeling the loss of Eleanor's presence like a physical ache. The snow had stopped, but the power was out across the neighborhood. Except in my house, the lights worked, the heat ran, the refrigerator hummed. It was as if the house had its own power source independent of the grid. "Eleanor," I ventured, standing in the kitchen. "Are you there? I'm sorry if I upset you." No response. Just the normal sounds of a house, but it felt hollow now, mechanical rather than alive. Days passed. The snow melted. Life returned to normal in the external world. But inside my house, the silence continued. No more dreams. No more subtle adjustments to my comfort. No more sense of being watched over. The house functioned as any house would, nothing more. I missed her terribly. I hadn't realized how accustomed I'd grown to the companionship, the sense of never being truly alone. Now the house felt like any other structure. Walls and roof, nothing more. Almost a month after our fight, I made a decision. I went to the hardware store and came back with supplies. Paint, brushes, wood polish, new fixtures for the bathroom, a stained glass panel for the window where Eleanor had once watched for Thomas's return from work. I started in the entryway, carefully stripping decades of paint from the original woodwork, restoring it to the rich cherry finish Thomas had so painstakingly created. I worked all weekend, singing softly as I did, occasionally talking about what I was doing. "Thomas built this with so much love," I said as I polished the banister. "I want to honor that. I want to take care of your home the way he would have wanted." As Sunday evening approached, I was putting the final touches on the restored entry hall when I felt it, the subtlest shift in the air, like someone quietly entering a room behind me. The fresh paint on the walls seemed to dry faster than it should. The wood beneath my polishing cloth grew warm. "Eleanor?" I whispered. "Are you there?" The light from the setting sun through the windows intensified for a moment, casting a warm glow across the newly restored woodwork. The house creaked, a single, deliberate sound, like someone clearing their throat before speaking. I smiled, tears welling in my eyes. I missed you too. That night, I dreamed of Eleanor directly for the first time. Not through Thomas's memories, but face to face. She stood in my bedroom, a slender woman in a 1920s dress, her eyes kind but serious. "The house has never been the protector," she said, her voice like wind through summer leaves. "I have, from the beginning." "I understand that now," I replied. She stepped closer, and I could smell lavender. "No one has ever spoken to me as you do. No one has understood that I am not haunting this house. I am this house." "Why me?" I asked. "Why show yourself to me when others have lived here before?" "Because you listened," she said simply. "Because you were alone, as I was. Because you needed a home as much as this house needed someone to care for it." "I'm not planning to leave," I assured her. Her expression grew troubled. "Everyone leaves eventually. That's the burden of remaining. Watching those you protect grow old and go while you endure." I woke to the sound of gentle rain against my window, feeling more rested than I had in weeks. The house felt alive again, but different somehow. More open, less controlling. As if our conflict had established boundaries between us, a healthier relationship. As spring arrived, bringing Seattle's iconic cherry blossoms and renewed energy to the city, I found myself thinking about Eleanor's words about everyone leaving eventually. The house had stood for 100 years and might stand for 100 more. My life would be just one chapter in its long history. But for now, in this moment, we had found each other. A lonely woman and a living house, each protecting the other in our own ways. And perhaps that was enough. Sometimes at night, I still hear footsteps on the stairs at exactly 3:17 a.m. But now, instead of stopping outside my door in hesitation, they continue into my room. I feel a gentle weight sit on the edge of my bed, a mother's hand smoothing my hair, ensuring I'm safe before withdrawing to continue her endless vigil over the house that feels alive. Because it is. So, the next time you hear your house creak in the night, or feel a sudden warmth that can't be explained by your heating system, or notice a door that was definitely closed now standing slightly ajar, maybe pause and consider. Is your house simply settling? Or is it trying to tell you something? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. Has your home ever seemed to communicate with you? Have you ever felt protected by the very walls around you? Or am I simply someone who's spent too much time alone in an old house with an active imagination? Subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this one. I have many more to tell about my life with Eleanor and the house that feels alive. And if enough of you are interested, next time I'll tell you about the hidden room I found in the basement, the one that doesn't appear in any of the building plans, the one with the rocking cradle that sometimes moves on its own. Until next time, sleep well in your homes tonight. And maybe, just maybe, whisper a little thank you to your walls before you drift off. You never know who might be listening. Story number 3. Hey there, night owls and insomnia warriors. Before we dive into tonight's story, if you're enjoying these late-night tales, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and notification bell. Leave a comment below with your own small-town mysteries. I might just feature one in an upcoming episode. And now, get comfortable, dim those lights, and let me take you somewhere that feels familiar yet not quite right. The story begins. The thing about small towns is that they're like ancient books with pages stuck together. There are whole chapters you'll never see unless you know exactly where to look. And sometimes, that's for the best. My name is Alex Morgan, and I grew up in Cedar Springs, Michigan. Population 3,523 and shrinking. One of those places where the main street has more closed storefronts than open ones, and where the tallest building is still the grain silo from 1932. It's the kind of town where everyone knows everyone. Or at least, that's what we tell ourselves. I never planned on coming back after college, but when Mom got sick last year, I didn't have much choice. Pancreatic cancer. By the time they found it, there wasn't much to do but make her comfortable. Now, I'm 32, living in my childhood bedroom again, and working at the local newspaper, the Cedar Springs Sentinel. Not exactly where I saw myself ending up, but life has a way of bringing you full circle. The paper's not much, local sports, town council meetings, business openings, and the occasional feature on someone's prize-winning pumpkin. But it pays enough to cover the mortgage on Mom's house, which is now my house. I guess it was about 2 months ago when I first noticed it, the looks. I'd be at Bailey's Diner getting coffee or picking up groceries at Thompson's Market, and I'd catch someone staring. But not in the usual small-town, there's the Morgan boy way. These were different looks, cautious, almost fearful, like they were trying to decide something about me. I didn't think much of it at first. Small towns have long memories, and I wasn't exactly a model teenager. But this felt different. Heavier somehow, like the air before a thunderstorm. Then the packages started appearing. The first one was on a Tuesday. I remember because that's when we send the paper to print. I'd worked late, finalizing the layout, and it was nearly midnight when I got home. The porch light was flickering. I needed to change that bulb, and there, sitting in the cone of uncertain light, was a small package wrapped in brown paper. No postage, no address, just my name written in neat block letters. I picked it up. It was surprisingly heavy for its size, about the weight of a thick book. I brought it inside, set it on the kitchen counter, and stared at it for a good 5 minutes, debating. In movies, this is always when the protagonist does something stupid, opens the mysterious package, unleashes the ancient evil. But this was Cedar Springs, not a horror film. So I got a knife from the drawer and carefully cut the tape. Inside was a rock. Not just any rock, though. A smooth, black stone about the size of my palm with a strange symbol etched into its surface. Something like a cross, but with an extra line through the middle and tiny markings around the edges. There was no note, no explanation. "What the hell?" I said to the empty kitchen. The stone was cold to the touch, unnaturally cold, like it had been sitting in a freezer rather than on my porch. I set it down and wiped my hand on my jeans, a vague discomfort crawling up my spine. I should have thrown it away. Instead, I put it on the bookshelf in the living room and tried to forget about it. Just some kids playing a prank, I told myself. This town doesn't have much in the way of entertainment. 2 days later, I was at work when Marjorie Winters came in. She's the town librarian, has been since before I was born. Must be pushing 70 now, with that particular librarian ability to silence you with just a look. She was carrying a manila folder. "Alex," she said, her voice low even though we were the only ones in the office, "I believe this belongs to your mother." She set the folder on my desk, her thin fingers lingering on it for a moment. Her eyes met mine, and there was something there I couldn't quite read. "What is it?" I asked. "Something she asked me to keep safe. Said if anything happened to her to wait a while and then give it to you." She straightened her cardigan. "It's been a year now. I think it's time." Before I could ask any more questions, she turned and walked out, the bell above the door jingling cheerfully behind her. The folder contained a single photograph, yellowed with age, the edges worn soft. It showed a group of people standing in what looked like Miller's Woods, just outside of town. There were 12 of them, arranged in a circle around some kind of stone altar. They wore ordinary clothes. This wasn't some robed cult scene from a movie. Just regular folks in jeans and sweaters. But something about their posture, the rigid way they stood, sent a shiver through me. I recognized a few faces. There was Frank Thompson, who owned the grocery store, Principal Hardin from the high school, and standing third from the left, my mother. Young, maybe in her 20s, her hair still dark and her face unlined. She was looking directly at the camera, her expression blank. I flipped the photo over. Written in faded blue ink was a date, October 17th, 1992, and a single sentence. The last gathering. That would have been just before I was born, November 1992. I sat at my desk for a long time, staring at that photograph, trying to make sense of it. Mom had never been religious as far as I knew, certainly never mentioned anything about gatherings in the woods. She was a kindergarten teacher, for heaven's sake. The most controversial thing about her was that she let kids have an extra cookie at snack time. But there she was, standing in a circle around an altar with 11 other adults from Cedar Springs. I slipped the photo into my bag and tried to focus on work. There was a story about the high school football team going to state championships that needed editing, and Daryl from the hardware store wanted to run an ad for his end-of-summer sale. Normal, everyday things that suddenly felt like a thin veneer over something else. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the photo, about the stone someone had left on my porch, about the looks I'd been getting around town. At 3 a.m, I finally gave up, went downstairs, and booted up my laptop. I started with the date from the photo. October 17th, 1992. I searched the digital archives of the Sentinel, looking for anything unusual. There wasn't much. A report on the Fall Harvest Festival, an announcement about the upcoming Halloween parade. Normal small-town news. But then I found it, buried in the police blotter from October 18th. A single line. Disturbance reported at Miller's Woods, no citations issued. That was it. No details about what kind of disturbance, who reported it, or who was involved. Just that one line. I dug deeper, searched for any mention of groups or gatherings or anything unusual in the woods around that time. Nothing in the newspaper, but when I widened my search to include the county records that had been digitized, I found something else. A police report from the county sheriff, filed October 19, 1992. The report was brief, most of it redacted, but the unredacted portions mentioned responding to a call about suspicious activity in Miller's Woods. When officers arrived, they found evidence of a gathering, including symbols drawn in the dirt and animal remains. No arrests were made due to lack of evidence connecting individuals to the scene. Animal remains. I closed my laptop, suddenly cold despite the warm night. I went to the living room and picked up the black stone from the shelf. In the darkness, the etched symbol seemed to catch what little light there was, almost glowing. I ran my thumb over it, feeling the grooves of the carving. What had my mother been involved in, and why was someone leaving me messages about it now, a year after her death? The next day was Saturday, and I decided to pay Frank Thompson a visit. His store wasn't busy. It never is at 8 a.m. on weekends. He was at the register, glasses perched on the end of his nose as he read the paper. The bell jangled as I walked in, and he looked up. "Alex," he said, and there was that look again. Cautious, assessing. "What can I do for you today?" I pulled out the photograph and placed it on the counter. "You can tell me about this." Frank's face went perfectly still. Then, very deliberately, he folded his newspaper, took off his glasses, and looked around the empty store. "Where did you get that?" His voice was barely above a whisper. "Marjorie Winters gave it to me. Said it belonged to my mother." He sighed deeply. "Your mother would not have wanted you to have this, Alex. Not yet. She's been dead for a year. I think 'yet' has come and gone." Frank's eyes hardened just slightly. "You always were impatient, just like your father." That pulled me up short. Mom rarely talked about my father. Said he left before I was born and she didn't know where he went. I'd stopped asking about him by the time I was 10. What does my father have to do with this? Frank ignored the question. "Have you received anything unusual lately? Packages or letters?" The stone. I didn't mention it. Something told me to keep that to myself for now. "No, why would I?" His shoulders relaxed slightly. "Listen, Alex, some things are better left alone. What happened back then, it's over. Has been for a long time. Digging it up won't do anyone any good, least of all you." Something happened in Miller's Woods in October 1992, something that involved my mother, you, and 10 other people from this town. I want to know what it was." Frank's face closed off completely. "I can't help you, Alex, and I'd advise you to let this go, for your own sake." He put his glasses back on. "Now, unless you're buying something, I've got inventory to check." I left empty-handed, but my mind was racing. Frank knew something, obviously, but he wasn't going to tell me. I needed another angle. I decided to try Principal Hardin. She was retired now, but still lived in the same house on Maple Street. I'd had her for American history in 11th grade, strict but fair, with a no-nonsense approach to everything. If anyone would give me straight answers, it might be her. I was wrong. When I showed her the photograph, her reaction was even more extreme than Frank's. She actually stepped back, like I'd thrust a snake in her face instead of an old picture. "Where did you get that?" she hissed, unconsciously echoing Frank. "That's not important. What's important is what you and my mother and the others were doing in those woods." She crossed her arms tightly across her chest. "It was nothing. A book club. We met outdoors because the weather was nice." I almost laughed. "A book club? With an altar and animal remains?" Her eyes widened slightly at that last part, but she recovered quickly. "I don't know what you think you know, Alex, but you're mistaken. Now, I need to water my garden before it gets too hot." And with that, she closed the door in my face. 2 down, 10 to go. But I was starting to see a pattern. Nobody wanted to talk about whatever had happened in those woods. They were afraid, but of what? Some old scandal coming to light? Legal repercussions? Or something else entirely? I recognized 8 of the 12 people in the photo. Besides my mother, Frank, and Principal Hardin, there was Dr. Roberts, who delivered half the babies in town, including me. Pastor Williams from the Methodist Church. Elaine Cooper, who taught piano lessons. Chief Alvarez, who ran the police department until his retirement 5 years ago. And Mayor Wilson, who had been in office for as long as I could remember. The remaining 4 were unfamiliar to me. 3 men and 1 woman, all roughly the same age as the others would have been in 1992, late 20s to early 30s. I decided to try a different approach. Instead of confronting people directly, I'd do some research first. If something happened in those woods that involved animal remains and symbols drawn in dirt, there might be records of it somewhere besides that single police report. I started with the local historical society. It's a small operation, just a couple of rooms in what used to be the town hall before they built the new one. Mrs. Patterson volunteers there 3 days a week. She's in her 80s, sharp as a tack, and knows more about Cedar Springs history than anyone alive. "Alex Morgan," she said when I walked in. "Haven't seen you since the 8th grade field trip. How's your mother?" "She passed away last year, Mrs. Patterson." Her face fell. "Oh dear, I'm so sorry. I don't get out much these days, and people don't always think to tell me these things." She patted my hand. "She was a lovely woman, your mother. One of the best teachers the elementary school ever had." "Thank you. She spoke highly of you, too." A small lie. I don't think Mom ever mentioned Mrs. Patterson, but a kind one. I'm actually working on a piece for the paper about local history. Specifically, I'm interested in any unusual events or groups that might have been active in town during the early 1990s. Mrs. Patterson's smile dimmed just slightly. Unusual in what way? Anything out of the ordinary. Things that might have happened in Miller's Woods, for instance. And there it was again. That look. The one I'd been seeing all around town. Caution, assessment, fear. Miller's Woods has always been a popular spot for picnics and nature walks, she said carefully. The birdwatching club meets there every spring. What about in the fall? Say, October 1992? She began straightening papers on her desk that didn't need straightening. "I'm not sure what you're looking for, dear, but I don't recall anything special about that time. Now, if you're interested in local history, we have a wonderful collection of photographs from the town's centennial celebration in 1987. Would you like to see those?" I recognized the deflection for what it was, but I played along. Spent an hour looking through photos of parades and speeches and cake-cutting ceremonies. All the while, my mind kept circling back to that photograph. 12 people in a circle, an altar, symbols and dirt, animal remains, and no one willing to talk about it. I left the Historical Society no wiser than when I arrived. But as I was walking back to my car, I noticed a familiar figure across the street. Marjorie Winters, the librarian who had given me the photograph. She was watching me, making no attempt to hide it. When our eyes met, she nodded once, then turned and walked away. I followed her. She led me through downtown, past the shuttered movie theater and the diner, turning occasionally to make sure I was still behind her. Finally, she stopped at the entrance to the public library, a Carnegie building from 1905, one of the few truly beautiful structures in Cedar Springs. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of old books and furniture polish. The main room was empty except for a teenager shelving returns and an elderly man reading a newspaper in the corner. Marjorie walked straight to her office in the back, and I followed. She closed the door behind us and gestured for me to sit. "I've been watching you make the rounds," she said without preamble. "Frank, Helen Hardin, the Historical Society, you're asking questions. I'm trying to understand what my mother was involved in." Marjorie sighed deeply. "Catherine wanted to protect you from all this. We all did. But I knew that once you saw that photograph, you wouldn't stop until you had answers, and give me answers." She looked at me for a long moment as if making a final decision. Then she reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a thin, leather-bound book. "This is a journal kept by Jessica Carpenter. She was the woman standing next to your mother in that photograph, the one with the red hair." I took the journal carefully. The leather was worn soft, the pages yellowed at the edges. "Jessica left town right after what happened in the woods. She gave me this before she went, made me promise to keep it safe, said someday someone might need to know." "Know what?" Marjorie's eyes were tired. "The truth about what we were doing, why we stopped, and what's still out there in those woods." I opened the journal to the first page. The handwriting was neat, precise. The entry was dated September 3rd, 1992. Today, we finally found it. After months of searching, translating ancient texts following obscure references, the altar stone in Miller's Woods. It doesn't look like much, just a flat rock embedded in the ground, easy to miss unless you know exactly what you're looking for. But the symbols are there, faint but visible. This is it, the gateway Frank told us about. I looked up at Marjorie. "Gateway to what?" "Keep reading, Sep 10. Frank led the ritual tonight. "Just a preliminary one," he said, "to test the waters." We stood in a circle around the altar, 12 of us, as the text specified. Frank chanted in that strange language while we repeated the phrases he taught us. Nothing happened at first. Then the air above the altar seemed to shimmer, like heat rising from pavement in summer. Just for a moment. Then it was gone. But we all saw it. We all felt it. Something responded to our call. Septon 17, second ritual tonight. More intense. Frank brought the chicken. I didn't want to watch, but he said it was necessary. "A life for a life," he said. "A door requires a key." The way the blood pooled on the stone, it didn't flow normally. It moved like it was being pulled toward the center. And the shimmer was stronger this time. I could almost see through it to somewhere else. Somewhere dark. I closed the journal, my stomach turning. They were sacrificing animals? For what? "We thought we were opening a door to another plane of existence," Marjorie said softly. "A place of power and knowledge. Frank had found these old texts, you see, claimed they described a way to access a realm beyond our own, where we could gain abilities beyond normal human limitations." "That sounds like—" "Yes?" She cut me off. "I know what it sounds like. We didn't use that word, though. We told ourselves it was more like quantum physics, parallel dimensions, not the other thing. I opened the journal again, flipping through pages. More ritual descriptions, more animals, a growing sense of unease in Jessica's writing, even as she described increasingly strange phenomena around the altar. Cold spots, whispers just beyond hearing, shadows moving without anything to cast them. Then I reached October 17th, 1992. The date from the photograph. Tonight is the final ritual, the culmination of everything we've been working toward. Frank says we're ready to fully open the gateway. He's bringing a larger sacrifice. I'm frightened, but I can't back out now. None of us can. We've come too far, seen too much. And if what Frank says is true, after tonight we'll have power beyond imagination. Later. Oh God, what have we done? It wasn't supposed to happen like that. The sacrifice wasn't supposed to be a person. Frank never said anything about a person, but he brought that drifter, the one who'd been hanging around town for a few days. Said we needed a human life to fully open the door. We should have stopped him. We should have walked away. But by the time we realized what he intended, it was too late. He had a knife. The drifter was already tied to the altar, drugged but conscious enough to be terrified. Catherine tried to intervene. She grabbed Frank's arm, told him this wasn't what we agreed to. He pushed her away so hard she fell. Said we were all committed now, that there was no turning back. Then he slit the man's throat. The blood hit the altar stone and something changed. The air didn't just shimmer this time. It split open, like tearing a hole in reality itself. And something started coming through. I can't describe it. My mind won't form the words. But it was vast and ancient and hungry. Frank stepped toward it, arms outstretched like he was greeting an old friend. It took him first, just engulfed him. Then it reached for the rest of us. We ran, all of us except Frank, scattered into the woods, hearing that thing behind us, feeling its pull. I don't know how we escaped. Maybe it was satisfied with Frank. Maybe it couldn't stay in our world for long. But by the time the sheriff arrived, Catherine had called from a payphone on the edge of town. There was nothing there. No Frank, no drifter. Just an empty clearing with an altar stone covered in blood. We agreed never to speak of it to anyone. Not the rituals, not the door, not what came through. We would go back to our lives and pretend none of it ever happened. What else could we do? Who would believe us? But I can't stay here, not with that thing still out there in the woods, because I know it's still there. I can feel it, waiting, growing stronger, biding its time. I'm leaving tomorrow. I don't know where I'll go, but it has to be far from here, from that altar, from what we unleashed. God forgive us for what we did. I closed the journal, my hands shaking slightly. This can't be real. Marjorie's face was grim. I wish it wasn't. But I was there, Alex. I saw it happen. I saw that thing take Frank, and we all felt it searching for us in the woods as we ran. But this is... I struggled for words. This is insane. Human sacrifice? Doorways to other dimensions? Things coming through? I know how it sounds. That's why we never talked about it. Just tried to move on with our lives to forget. Some left town, like Jessica. The rest of us stayed, kept the secret. What about Frank? Didn't people wonder what happened to him? We told everyone he'd moved away suddenly. Family emergency in another state. Over time, people stopped asking. I thought of the stone that had appeared on my porch, the strange symbol carved into it. Someone's been leaving me messages, a black stone with markings. Marjorie paled. When? A couple of weeks ago, and I've been getting strange looks around town. You've been asking questions. People are worried. About what? That I'll expose what happened. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. That you'll finish what your father started. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. My father? What are you talking about? Frank Thompson was your father, Alex." The room seemed to tilt around me. "No, that's not. Mom said my father left before I was born." "In a manner of speaking, he did, but not the way you think. You're saying Frank Thompson, the man who was taken by some entity from another dimension, was my father?" Marjorie nodded slowly. "You were born 8 months after that night in the woods. Catherine never told anyone who your father was, but we all knew. She and Frank had been seeing each other for months before he found those texts and got obsessed with the rituals." I sat in stunned silence, trying to process this information. Frank Thompson, the man who'd run the grocery store my entire life, who'd given me candy when I came in with Mom as a child, who'd hired me for my first job stocking shelves in high school. He'd never said a word, never given any indication. If Frank was taken that night, then how is he still running the grocery store? Marjorie's eyes filled with tears. "That's not Frank, Alex, not anymore. It hasn't been Frank for a long time." A chill ran through me. "What do you mean?" "Something came back from the woods 3 days after that night. It looked like Frank, talked like Frank, but we all knew it wasn't him. We could feel it, the wrongness. But what could we do? Go to the police? Tell them that our friend had been replaced by something from another dimension? You're saying that for my entire life, that thing has been living here pretending to be Frank Thompson? Not just pretending, being him in every way that matters to the outside world. Running his store, paying his taxes, attending town functions." She paused. "Watching you." "Watching me? Why? Because of who you are. When you were born, we all feared. Well, we didn't know what to expect. A child conceived right before that night with Frank as the father. But you seemed normal, just a regular baby." Catherine was so relieved. Marjorie sighed. "But the thing that came back, the thing pretending to be Frank, it's always kept an eye on you. We don't know why." I thought of all the times Frank had been present in my life. School events, little league games, the odd piece of advice or word of encouragement. Always there, but never too close, watching from a distance. "And now," Marjorie continued, "people are leaving you messages. The black stone, that's one of the symbols from the ritual texts. A warning, maybe, or an invitation." "An invitation to what?" "To finish the ritual. To fully open the gateway that we only partially opened that night." Her eyes locked with mine. "That's why no one talks about it, Alex. Why we've kept the secret all these years. Because whatever came through that night, whatever took Frank's place, it's been waiting, preparing, and we think it needs you to complete what your father started." The implications of what she was saying crashed over me in waves. My father hadn't abandoned us. He'd been taken by something from another dimension. That something was still here, living among us. And now it, or others who knew the truth, were leaving me messages, drawing me toward... what? "There's more," Marjorie said. "The others who were there that night, they've been watching too. Some think you're dangerous, that your connection to Frank and to what happened makes you a liability. They're the ones who've been giving you those looks around town, trying to decide what to do about you." "Do about me? I haven't done anything. It's not what you've done. It's what they fear you might do. What you might be capable of." She glanced at the journal on my lap. "Some believe that because of your parentage, because you were conceived during the time the rituals were taking place, you might have abilities or connections to that other place." I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "That's ridiculous. I'm not some supernatural being. I'm just a guy who works at a small-town newspaper. I know, and most of us have tried to protect you over the years, to keep the truth hidden, to let you live a normal life. That's what your mother wanted more than anything. Then why give me the photograph now? Why start all this?" Marjorie's face grew serious. "Because the black stone appearing on your porch means something has changed. someone has broken the pact of silence. And you deserve to know the truth, to be prepared. Prepared for what? October 17th is in 2 weeks, Alex. 30 years to the day since that night in the woods. Anniversaries have power in these matters. She reached across the desk and took my hand. Whatever is coming, you need to be ready. I sat in silence, my mind spinning with everything I'd learned. My entire life, everything I thought I knew about myself, my mother, my town, had been a carefully constructed lie. And beneath that lie was something so fantastic, so terrifying, that I still wasn't sure I believed it. And yet, the photograph was real, the journal seemed authentic, and the fear in Marjorie's eyes couldn't be faked. What should I do? I finally asked. Stay away from Miller's Woods. Don't go looking for the altar stone. And whatever you do, don't trust the thing that calls itself Frank Thompson. She squeezed my hand. I'll talk to the others. We need to be unified now, to protect you and the town. I nodded slowly, then stood to leave, the journal clutched in my hand. Keep that safe, Marjorie said, but keep it hidden. There are still things in there that, well, knowledge can be dangerous in the wrong hands. As I walked to the door, a final question occurred to me. The black stone that was left on my porch. You said it's a symbol from the ritual texts, a warning or an invitation. But who left it there? Marjorie's expression was grim. That's what worries me most, Alex. It could have been anyone in town who knows the truth. Or what? Or it could have been Frank, the thing that used to be Frank. Calling you to fulfill your father's legacy. She met my eyes steadily. And if that's the case, we're already running out of time. I left the library in a daze, the journal hidden in my jacket. The afternoon sun felt too bright, too normal, for the darkness that had just been revealed to me. I walked without direction, my mind replaying everything Marjorie had told me. My father was Frank Thompson. Frank had led a group in ritual sacrifices to open a gateway to another dimension. Something had come through and taken him, and now, 30 years later, that something might be trying to use me to finish what he started. It was insane, impossible. And yet, I found myself on Main Street, staring across at Thompson's grocery. Through the large front windows I could see him, the thing that looked like Frank, helping Mrs. Delacourt with her shopping bags. Smiling, acting human. Had he always been watching me, waiting for the right moment? And what about the others from that night? I looked around at the familiar buildings, the familiar faces of people going about their day in Cedar Springs. How many of them knew? How many had been keeping this secret all these years? This is why no one talks about the cults in our town. Not because they don't exist, but because the truth is so much worse than anyone could imagine. And I'm at the center of it all. The son of a man who was taken by something from beyond our world. 30 years to the day, in 2 weeks' time. The black stone sits on my bookshelf at home, waiting. A warning or an invitation. I don't know what's coming, but I know one thing for certain. Cedar Springs is not the quiet, boring town I thought it was. Beneath its ordinary surface lies a darkness that has been growing for 3 decades. And it knows my name. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and join our midnight community. Leave a comment below about what you think Alex should do next, or if you've ever felt like your small town was hiding dark secrets beneath its surface. And don't worry, part 2 of this story will be coming soon. Sweet dreams, if you can still sleep after this. Story number 4. Hey there, fellow night owls. Before we begin tonight's story, I want to share something strange that happened to me last week. I was recording this very story in my closet studio when I heard what sounded like someone whispering right behind me. I turned around, but no one was there. Just my winter coats and some old shoe boxes. The whispers seemed to say, "Tell them about the lake house." Which is weird because, well, that's exactly what tonight's story is about. A lake house with secrets buried deep. If you've ever heard something that shouldn't be there, felt watched when you were alone, or wondered what lurks in the spaces between our world and whatever lies beyond, this story might hit a little too close to home. Drop a comment below if you've ever experienced something you can't explain. And if you're listening to this story in the dark, maybe consider turning on a light. Just saying. Now, get comfortable. As comfortable as you can be when fear starts creeping in. The story is about to begin. I could hear someone whispering, but no one was there. I never believed in ghosts. Not really. Sure, I'd get that familiar chill watching horror movies or walking past a cemetery at night, but deep down, I chalked it all up to an overactive imagination mixed with evolutionary survival instincts. Nothing more. Nothing truly supernatural. That was before the lake house, before the whispers started. It was supposed to be a mental health retreat, a chance to reset after my divorce and the subsequent promotion that doubled my workload at the marketing firm. Burnout, my therapist called it. 2 weeks minimum, she had insisted, sliding a brochure across her desk. Somewhere with no Wi-Fi, no emails. Just you and your thoughts, Alex. I remember laughing. Me and my thoughts alone sounds like a horror movie. She didn't laugh back. That's exactly why you need this. So, there I was, driving my Honda Civic up a winding road in the Adirondacks, watching as my cell signal gradually diminished to nothing. The rental agency had emailed me door codes and instructions, emphasizing the property's seclusion as its main selling point. Nearest neighbor is 4 miles away, the listing had boasted. Complete privacy guaranteed. They certainly delivered on that promise. The lake house itself was unexpected. Not the rustic cabin I'd imagined, but a sprawling, mid-century modern structure, all glass and angles, perched on a small cliff overlooking the lake. It must have been someone's architectural passion project back in the 60s, renovated enough times to keep it from falling apart, but not enough to erase its vintage character. I parked and just sat there for a moment, listening to the engine tick as it cooled. The silence was immediate and absolute. No traffic sounds, no human voices, just the distant call of birds and the gentle lapping of water against the shore below. I felt something in my chest loosen ever so slightly. Maybe my therapist was right. The front door opened with a soft beep as I punched in the code. Inside, the house was awash in the golden light of late afternoon, dust motes dancing in the sunbeams that streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The great room opened onto a deck that seemed to float above the dark blue waters of the lake. Pine-covered mountains rose dramatically on the opposite shore. "Wow," I whispered to myself. The sound traveled oddly in the space, almost as if the house absorbed my voice. "Hello?" I tried, a little louder this time. Nothing, just the faint echo of my own voice bouncing back at me. I spent that first afternoon exploring the house, running my fingers over the smooth walnut paneling, testing out the vintage furniture and investigating the kitchen with its surprisingly modern appliances. The owner had left a bottle of local wine with a note, "Welcome. Listen to the silence." I had every intention of doing just that. After unpacking and making a simple dinner from the groceries I'd brought, I took my wine out to the deck. The sun was setting, painting the lake and surrounding forest in deepening shades of purple and blue. Stars were already appearing, more than I'd seen in years living in the glow of Boston's light pollution. A loon called somewhere in the distance, its cry hauntingly beautiful. That first night, I slept better than I had in months, possibly years. The bedroom faced east, and I left the curtains open, falling asleep to the view of stars and waking naturally as the first light of dawn painted the sky in delicate pinks and oranges. No alarm, no emails pinging, just the gentle return of consciousness, my body remembering what it felt like to wake up without anxiety already coursing through my veins. For 3 days, this peaceful routine continued. I hiked the trail that wound around the lake. I read books from the well-stocked library. I cooked elaborate meals just for the joy of it. I sketched the view from different windows, reviving a hobby I'd abandoned in college. I thought about absolutely nothing related to work or my failed marriage. It was on the fourth night that I first heard it hit. The whispering. I had fallen asleep on the couch, some paperbacks splayed on my chest. The fire I'd built earlier had died down to embers, casting the room in a dim, reddish glow. Something pulled me from sleep. Not a sound exactly, but a change in the air. A presence. My eyes opened to darkness, the embers now just faintly glowing, and there it was, a sound so faint I had to hold my breath to hear it. Whispering. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Not words exactly, but the unmistakable cadence of human speech, hushed and urgent. I sat up slowly, the book sliding to the floor with a soft thud that sounded thunderous in the stillness. "Hello?" I called out, my voice surprisingly steady. "Is someone there?" The whispering stopped immediately. I stood, heart hammering in my chest, and turned on a lamp. The sudden light was almost painful, but it revealed nothing. Just the empty living room exactly as it had been when I'd fallen asleep. I checked the doors. Locked. Windows secured. I even walked the perimeter of the house, flashlight in hand, feeling both foolish and terrified. There was no one there. Of course there wasn't. The nearest house was miles away. Just the wind, I told myself, crawling into bed an hour later after triple-checking every lock. Or a dream. But deep down, I knew it wasn't either of those things. The next day passed normally enough. I kept busy, cleaning the already spotless kitchen, organizing the bookshelves by color, then changing my mind and organizing them by author. Anything to keep my mind occupied. As dusk approached, I found myself turning on every light in the house, a childish defense against the coming darkness. I considered leaving, cutting my mental health retreat short and returning to the comfortable chaos of my regular life. But something held me back. Pride, maybe, or curiosity, or the knowledge that my therapist would give me that look, the one that said she was disappointed but not surprised. So I stayed. And as I laid in bed that night, staring at the ceiling and listening to the house settle around me, the whispering returned. It started as a barely perceptible sound, like the rustling of leaves. But gradually, it took shape. Multiple voices, overlapping, urgent yet unintelligible. They seemed to be coming from inside the walls themselves. I lay perfectly still, barely breathing, straining to make out words. Should never have come. Always watching. The lake knows. I sat bolt upright, sweat prickling at my hairline despite the cool night air. Those weren't imagined words. They were clear, distinct phrases, even if I couldn't make out the full sentences they belonged to. "Who's there?" I demanded, my voice cracking. "This isn't funny." The whispering stopped instantly, leaving a silence so profound it rang in my ears. Then, slowly, I became aware of a new sound. Water dripping. It seemed to be coming from the bathroom. I reached for my phone, using its flashlight to guide me across the unfamiliar room. The bathroom door was ajar, and I pushed it open with my foot, heart racing. The sink tap was running just slightly. A steady drip, drip, drip echoed in the tiled space. I was certain I hadn't left it on. I'm almost obsessive about things like that. But there it was. I reached out and turned it off, the squeaking of the handle unnaturally loud. As I looked up into the mirror, I froze. For just a second, less than a heartbeat, I thought I saw someone standing behind me. Just a shadow, really, a darker patch in the darkness. But when I whirled around, the bathroom was empty. Sleep was impossible after that. I sat in the living room with every light on, the TV playing some mindless reality show I'd found among the DVD collection, its manufactured drama and bright colors a lifeline to normality. Morning came eventually, gray and drizzling. I looked terrible, pale, with dark circles under my eyes. But more than that, I looked scared. And I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen fear so plainly written on my own face. I decided to go into town, partly for supplies but mostly for human contact. The drive took almost 40 minutes on winding forest roads, the trees pressing close on either side, branches scraping against my car like fingernails. The small town of Lakeview was exactly what you'd expect. A main street with a diner, a general store, a post office, and not much else. I chose the diner, sliding into a booth and ordering coffee and pancakes from a waitress whose name tag read Darlene. When she returned with my order, I worked up the courage to ask a question that had been gnawing at me. "The lake house on Pine Ridge Road, do you know anything about it?" Darlene paused, coffee pot hovering above my cup. "The Holloway place? You staying there?" I nodded, and something flickered across her face. Concern, maybe, or pity. "It's a beautiful house," she said carefully. "Been there long as I can remember. Did something happen there?" She set the coffee pot down and slid into the seat across from me. The diner was nearly empty, just a couple of old men at the counter, too far away to hear. "Look," she said, keeping her voice low, "I'm not one for ghost stories or any of that nonsense, but that house—" She glanced over her shoulder, then leaned in closer. "The original owner, Dr. Holloway, he was some big-shot psychiatrist from New York City. Built that place in 62 or 63. Real modern, real impressive back then. Used to bring patients up, special cases, he called them, for immersive therapy." She made air quotes around the words, her expression skeptical. "What kind of therapy?" I asked, my pancakes forgotten. "The kind where not everyone goes home afterward," she said bluntly. "There was a girl, summer of 67, Eleanor something, college student with nervous problems. They found her in the lake 3 weeks after she arrived. Officially ruled a suicide, but—" She trailed off, shaking her head. "But what?" "But people talk, and they say there were others, nothing proven, mind you. Dr. Holloway was well connected. The investigations never went far." A cold feeling spread through my chest. What happened to him? Shot himself in the study in 1972. After that, the house changed hands a bunch of times. Nobody stays long. She stood up, straightening her apron. "Look, I'm not saying it's haunted or cursed or whatever, but sometimes places hold on to things, you know? Bad energy or memories or something. I wouldn't spend too much time there alone, is all I'm saying." I thanked her, paid for my barely touched breakfast, and left. The rain had intensified, drumming on the roof of my car as I sat in the parking lot, trying to process what I'd just heard. Part of me wanted to drive straight back to Boston, but another part, the part that had always been too curious for my own good, needed to know more. If nothing else, I wanted to understand what I'd heard the night before. I stopped at the general store and bought supplies, extra batteries, candles, a couple of paperbacks, and enough food for several days. The elderly man at the register looked at my pile and raised an eyebrow. "Storm coming," he said, nodding toward the window where the rain was now coming down in sheets. "They're saying it might be a bad one. Power lines out here aren't too reliable." Great. Just what I needed. The drive back to the lake house was tense, the road slick with rain, visibility poor through the forest. By the time I arrived, it was mid-afternoon, but the sky was so dark it might as well have been evening. The lake, visible through the trees, was choppy with whitecaps, the water gunmetal gray beneath the stormy sky. As I approached the house, I noticed something odd. A light was on in the upstairs window, the bedroom I'd been using. I was certain I'd turned everything off before leaving. My hands trembled slightly as I punched in the door code. The beep seemed muffled in the sound of the rain. Inside, the house was cold and still. "Hello," I called out, feeling foolish but needing to break the silence. "Anyone here?" No answer, of course. just the echo of my own voice and the distant rumble of thunder. I set my grocery bags down in the kitchen, then slowly climbed the stairs to check the bedroom. The light was indeed on, a small reading lamp beside the bed. The room was exactly as I'd left it, bed unmade, book face down on the nightstand. But something felt disturbed, as if someone had been moving through the space in my absence. I went to turn off the lamp and noticed a piece of paper on the pillow. It wasn't there when I left. My heart pounding, I picked it up. It was a page torn from a notebook, yellowed with age. The handwriting was small and cramped, the ink faded to a rusty brown. I can hear them whispering behind the walls. Dr. H says it's all in my mind, part of my condition. But I know better. They're trying to warn me. About him, about this place. I don't have much time left. The note was signed simply E. Eleanor, I presumed. The girl Darlene had mentioned, who drowned in the lake. I dropped the paper as if it had burned me. This had to be some kind of sick joke. Maybe the rental agency did this to spook guests, create a haunted experience to talk about online. Or maybe the previous renter had left it as a prank. But deep down, I didn't believe either explanation. Thunder crashed directly overhead, making me jump. The lights flickered once, twice, and then went out completely, plunging the house into gray dimness. Perfect, I muttered, trying to maintain some sense of normalcy. Just perfect. I made my way carefully downstairs, using my phone's flashlight to navigate. In the kitchen, I found the drawer with emergency supplies, matches, candles, a battery-powered lantern. I set them up around the living room, the warm glow of the flames creating more shadows than light. Outside, the storm intensified. Rain lashed against the windows in sheets. Wind howled around the eaves of the house, making the glass panes rattle in their frames. Lightning flashed, briefly illuminating the roiling surface of the lake below. And beneath it all, almost imperceptible at first, came the whispering. It started in the walls again, but soon it seemed to be coming from everywhere. The ceiling, the floor, the spaces between the furniture. Multiple voices, overlapping, rising and falling like waves. I could make out fragments more clearly now. She knows too much. Can't let them find us. In the walls, always in the walls. "Stop it," I shouted, pressing my hands over my ears. "Just stop." In the sudden silence that followed, there came a new sound. A scratching, scrabbling noise from somewhere above me, like something moving between the floors. Then a thud. Directly overhead, in the bedroom with the note. Every instinct told me to run, to get in my car and drive, storm be damned. But I couldn't leave, not just because of the weather, but because I needed to understand. I needed proof that I wasn't losing my mind. Clutching the lantern, I slowly climbed the stairs again. Each step creaked beneath my weight, the sound unnaturally loud. At the top of the stairs, I paused, listening. The house was silent now, save for the storm outside. The bedroom door was closed. I knew I'd left it open. With a trembling hand, I turned the knob and pushed. The door swung inward with a long, low creak. The room was empty. The note was gone from where I'd dropped it on the floor. The only evidence of disturbance was the window, now open a few inches, rain spattering onto the sill. I moved to close it, leaning over the bed to reach the window latch. As I did, I noticed something on the glass, a pattern in the condensation. Looking closer, I could see words, as if someone had written them with a fingertip. "They're in the walls." A flash of lightning illuminated the room, and in that instant I saw a reflection in the window glass. A face behind me, gaunt and pale, with hollow eyes and wet hair plastered to the skull. A woman's face. I whirled around with a cry, but the room was empty. Heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat, I backed out of the room, slammed the door, and ran downstairs, nearly falling in my haste. In the living room, I collapsed onto the couch, adrenaline making my entire body shake. I needed to leave, now. Storm or no storm, I couldn't stay another minute in this house. I grabbed my car keys and phone, not bothering with my luggage. I could replace clothes and toiletries. I just needed to get out. But as I reached for the front door, the whispering started again, louder now, almost at a normal speaking volume. And for the first time, I heard a complete, clear sentence. "You can't leave yet, Alex. We need you to find us." My name. They said my name. I froze, key in hand, as the scratching sound returned. No longer confined to the upstairs, but seeming to move through the very walls around me. Circling, searching. A tremendous crash of thunder shook the house, and with it came a sudden torrent of rain through the chimney, dousing the fire and plunging the room into near-total darkness. My phone, which I'd been clutching like a lifeline, chose that moment to die, its screen going black in my hand. In the darkness, I heard movement, soft footsteps on the hardwood floor, the gentle creak of someone sitting down in the chair opposite me. "Who's there?" I whispered, my voice barely audible even to my own ears. "Please, just tell me what you want." The answer came not in words, but in a sudden, bone-deep certainty. I needed to look behind the walls, where they were trapped, where they had always been trapped. Moving on instinct now, I felt my way to the kitchen, found a flashlight in the drawer, and then continued to the garage. The previous day, while exploring, I'd noticed tools hanging on a pegboard. A hammer, screwdrivers, a crowbar. Back in the living room, crowbar in hand, I approached the section of wall where the whispering seemed loudest. It was an interior wall, separating the living room from what I'd assumed was a storage closet. But now, running my hands over the wood paneling, I noticed inconsistencies. A slight gap, a seam where there shouldn't be one. Taking a deep breath, I wedged the crowbar into the gap and pulled. The panel came away with surprising ease, revealing not the closet I expected, but a narrow space behind the wall, a hidden passage, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. The flashlight beam revealed rough wooden stairs leading down into darkness. The whispering was coming from below, calling me down. Every horror movie I'd ever seen screamed at me to run, to get out, to call for help, but I knew somehow that I had to descend those stairs, that whatever waited at the bottom was the truth I'd been seeking. Step by careful step, I made my way down. The air grew colder, damper. The stairs ended in a small earth-floored room that smelled of mildew and something else, something older and more organic. The foundation of the house, I realized, was built directly into the bedrock of the cliff, and this room had been hollowed out of the stone itself. My flashlight beam played across the walls, revealing writing. Hundreds, maybe thousands of words scratched into the stone, names, dates, fragments of thoughts, pleas for help, and among them, repeated over and over, "He puts us in the walls." In the center of the room stood a large metal trunk, the kind they used to call a steamer trunk for ocean voyages long ago. It was secured with a heavy padlock, green with verdigris. The whispering had stopped. The only sound was my own ragged breathing and the distant rumble of thunder above. With shaking hands, I approached the trunk. The padlock, despite its aged appearance, broke easily under the crowbar. I hesitated only a moment before lifting the lid. Inside, carefully arranged, were personal effects. Clothing, jewelry, notebooks, photographs. Belongings of different styles spanning different decades. And on top, a leather-bound journal with "Property of Dr. Thomas Holloway" embossed on the cover. I opened it, turning pages by the beam of my flashlight. The entries detailed his treatments, young women brought to the lake house for his experimental therapy, women with hysteria or nervous conditions, or simply those who had displeased their families in some way, women no one would miss. The details were clinical, detached, but horrifying. Isolation, sensory deprivation, experimental drugs, and when they became inconvenient or threatened to expose him, when they failed to respond to treatment, they ended up in the lake. Or worse, the final pages described his growing paranoia, his conviction that his victims were speaking to him from beyond death, whispering behind the walls of the house he'd built to contain his secrets. I closed the journal, unable to read more. As I did, something fluttered from between the pages, a newspaper clipping yellowed with age. It was an obituary for Eleanor Simmons, aged 19, whose drowning was described as a tragic accident. The photo accompanying the obituary showed a young woman with serious eyes and dark hair pulled back from her face. The same face I'd seen reflected in the bedroom window. I don't remember much about climbing those stairs, about emerging into the living room where dawn was breaking through the windows. The storm had passed, leaving behind a washed-clean world of brilliant clarity. The lake below was mirror-smooth, reflecting the blue sky and white clouds. I packed my things mechanically, loaded them into my car, and then went back for the trunk. It was heavy, but adrenaline made it manageable. I had calls to make, to the police, to the Historical Society, to the families of the women whose names filled that awful journal. As I prepared to leave, taking one last look at the house, I felt it. A lightening of the air, a sense of release. The whispering had stopped for good. But as I pulled away down the driveway, I glanced in my rearview mirror and thought I saw them, standing in the wall of windows watching me go. Not with malice, but with gratitude. With peace. I never told my therapist the real reason I came back early from my retreat. I just said the isolation wasn't good for me after all. She seemed disappointed, but approved of my healthier color and renewed energy. I threw myself into a new project, creating a memorial website for the victims of Dr. Holloway, working with local historians to piece together their stories, to give names and faces to the women who had whispered to me from behind the walls. Sometimes, late at night when I'm alone in my apartment, I think I hear them still. Not frightening now, but comforting. Reminding me that even the most terrible secrets eventually find their way into the light. That even the voiceless will eventually be heard. Because sometimes, when you hear whispering but no one is there, someone is there after all. Someone who needs you to listen. And that's our story for tonight, sleepyheads. I hope it gave you just enough chills without keeping you from drifting off. But before you go, have you ever felt that sensation? The one where you're absolutely certain someone just whispered your name but you're completely alone. Drop a comment below and share your experience. The best story might just become our next feature. If you enjoyed tonight's tale and want more cozy horror to fall asleep to, hit that subscribe button. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload. Sweet dreams, or should I say pleasant nightmares. Until next time, sleep tight and don't let the whispers keep you up at night. A soft whisper, unless, of course, they have something important to tell you.